Giant Mountain Man. Rejected for being too old, until the black women whispered, "Act like you're mine." The towering figure trudges past another slammed door as the blacksmith's cruel laughter echoes through dusty streets. The mountain man's weathered hands tremble slightly, not from age but from the weight of endless rejection. Townspeople whisper he's destined for the poorhouse, a relic too broken for honest work. Yet sharp eyes watch from a seamstress shop window, calculating his worth differently. The black woman sees what others cannot. His gentle strength could be the perfect shield for her dangerous midnight work. She operates in shadows, helping the desperate escape to freedom, but suspicious eyes are closing in. Her underground network teeters on the edge of discovery. And one wrong move could destroy dozens of lives depending on her courage. Can an unlikely alliance between the dismissed and the desperate outwit those hunting them both? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast long shadows across Millhaven's dusty main street as Ezekiel Thornfield approached the blacksmith shop. At 58 years old and standing 6 feet 8 inches tall, he still commanded attention wherever he walked. His massive frame moved with surprising grace, weathered hands swinging gently at his sides. The blacksmith barely looked up from his anvil. "We ain't hiring." Zeke removed his worn hat. "Haven't even told you what I can do yet." "Don't need to." The blacksmith's hammer rang against hot metal. "You're too old for this work. Try the general store." The general store owner took one look at Zeke's graying beard and shook his head. "Sorry, friend. Need someone with more years ahead than behind." At the cattle ranch, the foreman laughed outright. "What are you, 60? You'd keel over before lunch." Each rejection cut deeper than the last. Zeke had traveled for months to reach Millhaven, following rumors of work and opportunity. Instead, he found only closed doors and dismissive glances. From her seamstress shop window, Seraphina Montgomery watched the giant man's slow walk of shame. At 28, she had learned to read people quickly. The mountain man's shoulders sagged with each rejection, but she noticed something others missed. When a small child ran into the street chasing a ball, the old man stepped protectively forward. When the child's mother scolded harshly, pain flickered across his weathered features. Sarah had been observing the town's rhythms for 3 years now. Her modest shop sat perfectly positioned to watch the main thoroughfare. Customers came for simple alterations, but Sarah gathered far more valuable intelligence. She learned which families struggled, which men gambled away their wages, and which women whispered about missing relatives. Her real work happened after sunset. Judge Cornelius Blackwood emerged from the courthouse, his black coat pristine despite the dust that coated everything else in town. He commanded respect wherever he walked. Citizens tipped their hats and stepped aside. His word carried the weight of law and moral authority. A desperate family approached him near the church steps. The woman clutched a faded photograph while her husband spoke in urgent, hushed tones. Judge Blackwood listened with apparent patience before delivering his verdict. "The law is clear. I cannot help you recover stolen property that may not have been stolen at all." The woman's shoulders shook as they walked away empty-handed. Zeke witnessed the exchange from across the street. Something about the family's defeated posture stirred memories he preferred to keep buried. The livery stable represented his final hope. The owner looked him up and down like examining a lame horse. "You're joking, right? Find yourself a rocking chair, old man. Your working days are done." Snickers rippled through the gathered men. Zeke felt heat rise in his cheeks but kept his voice steady. "I can work harder than men half my age." "Sure you can." The owner turned away. Next. Zeke stood alone in the street as the crowd dispersed. 3 years of wandering had led to this moment of complete rejection. He had nowhere left to go and no prospects remaining. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Most decent folks would be heading home for supper soon. Zeke considered sleeping under the stars again, as he had countless nights before. "You look like you could use some coffee." He turned to find the seamstress standing behind him. Up close, Her intelligent eyes held depths that surprised him. She carried herself with quiet confidence despite her modest dress and careful mannerisms. "That's kind of you, miss, but I haven't got money for coffee." "It's Mrs., actually." "And I wasn't planning to charge you." She studied his face carefully. "You're not from around here." "No, ma'am. Been traveling mostly." "Looking for work?" Zeke's jaw tightened. "Apparently I'm too old for honest labor." "Age can be useful sometimes. People underestimate what experience brings." Her voice carried hidden meaning. "Walk with me." She led him toward her shop as the street emptied. Oil lamps flickered to life in windows along the way. The town settled into its evening rhythm, unaware of the conversation about to change two lives forever. At her shop door, she paused and looked directly into his eyes. Her next words would be spoken quietly, but their impact would thunder through both their worlds. "I have a proposition for you, something that might benefit us both." She glanced around to ensure they were alone. "But first, you need to understand that some kinds of work happen after dark, work that requires trust and courage." Zeke felt something stir in his chest. Purpose, perhaps, or hope. What kind of work? Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The 4 words that followed would transform everything. "Act like you're mine." Zeke stared at the seamstress in confusion. The words made no sense in the context of their brief conversation. "I don't understand, ma'am." Sarah unlocked her shop door and motioned him inside. The small space smelled of cotton and lavender soap. Bolts of fabric lined the walls while a sewing machine sat near the front window. Everything appeared normal for a modest dressmaking business. "My name is Serafina Montgomery. What I'm about to show you could put us both in serious danger." She moved to the back wall and pressed against a particular wooden panel. It swung inward, revealing a hidden room beyond. Candlelight flickered across maps, blankets, and carefully organized supplies. "This is why I need a husband, or at least the appearance of one." Zeke stepped closer to examine the concealed space. His military experience recognized the systematic organization immediately. Someone had planned this operation with careful precision. "What exactly are you running here?" "Freedom." Sarah lit another candle, illuminating more details. "Families escaping bondage pass through Millhaven on their way north. I provide shelter, food, and safe passage to the next station." Maps covered one wall, marked with routes and safe houses. Names and dates filled a ledger beside them. Testimonial letters spoke of gratitude and successful journeys to safety. "Why tell me this? You don't know me." "I've been watching you all day. You helped that child in the street without thinking. You showed respect to everyone who rejected you. Character reveals itself in small moments." Zeke examined the supplies more closely. Medical kit, warm clothing, preserved food. Everything needed for desperate people making dangerous journeys. "And you need a husband because?" "Unmarried women attract suspicion when they move around town at night. But a devoted wife caring for her husband's business? Nobody questions that." Sarah pulled out a worn photograph. "These people are depending on me to keep this network operating." The image showed a family of 5 standing together, hope shining in their eyes. A note on the back read, "Thank you for giving us our future. I walked away once before when people needed help." Zeke's voice carried old pain. "Won't make that mistake again." "So you'll do it? Tell me what you need." Sarah outlined the arrangement over the next hour. They would present themselves as newlyweds to the community. Zeke would provide legitimacy and protection, while Sarah coordinated the underground network. His intimidating size would deter troublemakers, while his age would make him seem harmless to authorities. "Judge Blackwood has been asking questions lately. Having a husband might redirect his attention." They spent the evening preparing their cover story. Childhood sweethearts reunited after years apart. A simple ceremony performed by a traveling preacher. Details that would satisfy curious neighbors without raising suspicions. The next morning brought their first test. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house stopped by for dress alterations. Her sharp eyes immediately noticed Zeke sitting in the corner, mending leather harnesses. "Well, Sarah, you've been keeping secrets. Mrs. Henderson, I'd like you to meet my husband, Ezekiel. We were married yesterday evening." The older woman's expression shifted from suspicion to delight. "How wonderful. A woman your age needs a good man to look after her." Word spread quickly through Millhaven's social networks. By noon, half the town knew about the seamstress's sudden marriage, the other half heard by supper time. The transformation in how people treated Sarah was immediate and dramatic. Women who had previously ignored her stopped to offer congratulations. Shopkeepers who had barely acknowledged her existence now greeted her warmly. The respect accorded to married women flowed over her like a protective cloak. Zeke experienced his own social elevation. Men who had dismissed him as too old now sought his advice on various matters. His apparent devotion to his new bride earned approving nods from the community's moral guardians. 3 nights later, their first mission arrived. A family of 4 needed passage to the next safe house 15 miles north. Parents and 2 young children, exhausted from weeks of travel. Sarah fed them while Zeke studied the route maps. "Patrols have increased along the main road. We'll need to use the mountain trail." His knowledge of wilderness paths proved invaluable. Years of scouting had taught him to read terrain and anticipate dangers. They guided the family through back trails under cover of darkness, avoiding main roads where bounty hunters might be waiting. The children struggled with the rough path, but Zeke's gentle encouragement kept them moving. His massive frame provided comfort and protection against the night's uncertainties. They reached the next station before dawn, a farmhouse where sympathetic owners provided the next leg of the journey northward. "Thank you both," the father whispered before departing. "You've given us hope." Walking back to town as the sun rose, Sarah felt something she had not experienced in years. Partnership. Someone who understood the weight of their dangerous work and shared the burden willingly. "You're good at this," she told Zeke. "Feels right." Helping people find their way to something better. Their success encouraged other network members. Word spread quietly among trusted contacts that the Millhaven station was operating more efficiently than ever. Requests for assistance increased as their reputation grew. Judge Blackwood noticed the change too. He began appearing near Sarah's shop more frequently, always finding legitimate reasons for his presence. Reviewing property records at the courthouse across the street. Consulting with the sheriff about municipal matters. His attention felt like a cold shadow falling across their operation. "He's watching us," Sarah warned during one of their evening planning sessions. "Then we'll be extra careful, but we won't stop." Over the following weeks, their operation expanded beyond anything Sarah had imagined possible. Word spread through the underground network that Millhaven had become one of the most reliable stations on the northern route. Families arrived almost nightly, seeking passage to freedom. Sarah's intelligence network grew as married women throughout the town began confiding in her. Mrs. Patterson mentioned strange men asking questions at the hotel. The baker's wife reported suspicious activity near the old mill. Information flowed to Sarah like water finding its natural course. Her strategic mind had been shaped by necessity and heritage. Her father, Samuel Montgomery, had been born into bondage but gained his freedom through military service. He taught his daughter to think 3 steps ahead, to read maps like poetry, and to organize people toward common goals. When he died, he left her detailed charts of safe routes and trusted contacts stretching from Georgia to Canada. "Your mind is your greatest weapon," he had told her during their final conversation. "Use it to build bridges where others see only walls." Those lessons served her well now as she coordinated an increasingly complex operation. Supply caches needed regular restocking. Safe houses required constant communication. Routes had to be adjusted based on patrol patterns and seasonal changes. Zeke's contributions proved equally valuable, though rooted in different experiences. His skills had been forged during 3 years as a Union Army scout, navigating Confederate territory to gather intelligence for advancing troops. He could read terrain like a book, identifying hidden dangers and alternate paths invisible to untrained eyes. Broken branch there means someone passed recently, he explained during one nighttime journey. But see how the leaves are already brown? At least 2 days old. We're clear. His ability to track movement patterns helped them avoid bounty hunters and federal marshals. More importantly, his gentle nature calmed frightened children during the most dangerous portions of their journeys. The transformation in their social standing continued to provide perfect cover. Zeke found himself consulted on everything from livestock purchases to property disputes. His supposed expertise in mountain living made him a respected voice among the town's men. They had no idea his real knowledge came from years of military reconnaissance. Sarah's elevation in female social circles opened doors previously closed to her. Women shared gossip freely with the respectable married seamstress. She learned which husbands gambled away family savings, which families faced eviction, and most crucially, which neighbors might be sympathetic to their cause. 3 new safe houses joined their network within a month. The Presbyterian minister's widow offered her root cellar. A German immigrant family provided their barn loft. Even the town doctor quietly indicated his willingness to treat injuries without asking questions. But expanded operations brought expanded risks. Judge Blackwood's surveillance intensified as their success grew. He began timing his courthouse visits to coincide with their evening activities. His questions to shopkeepers grew more pointed. Why did the seamstress receive so many late-night visitors? What business kept her husband away from home after dark? The closest call came during their largest operation yet. 7 people needed passage north, including an elderly man struggling with a persistent cough. The group was too large for their usual mountain trail, forcing them to risk the main road under cover of heavy rain. Halfway to the next station, Zeke heard horses approaching fast from behind. His military instincts kicked in immediately. Everyone into the ravine. Now! He guided the group down a steep embankment, just as torchlights appeared around the bend. 3 riders passed above them, moving too quickly to notice disturbed mud on the roadside. Zeke's knowledge of terrain features had saved them from discovery, but barely. That was Sheriff Morrison's voice, Sarah whispered as they climbed back to the road. With Judge Blackwood and someone I didn't recognize. The realization that the judge was personally leading search parties chilled them both. This was no longer casual observation, but active hunting. Their partnership had evolved beyond mere cooperation into something deeper. Sarah found herself trusting Zeke's judgment completely, while he relied on her strategic thinking to navigate increasingly complex challenges. They worked together with an efficiency that felt natural, as if they had been partners for years rather than weeks. The community noticed their apparent devotion to each other. Women praised Sarah for finding such a caring husband in her later years. Men complimented Zeke on his obvious dedication to his wife's happiness. Their performance had become so convincing that sometimes they forgot it was an act. Late one evening, as they planned routes for the next group of travelers, Sarah made a startling admission. "I never felt safe before you came. Never felt needed this much before I met you." Their mutual respect had grown into genuine affection, though neither spoke of it directly. The work consumed their attention, demanding every ounce of energy and focus they possessed. Judge Blackwood's investigation reached a new level of intensity when he began questioning their neighbors directly. Mrs. Henderson reported his visit with obvious discomfort. He asked very specific questions about your comings and goings, wanted to know if I'd seen anything unusual. What did you tell him? That newlyweds often keep irregular hours. She blushed slightly. He didn't seem satisfied with that answer. That same week, Sarah discovered evidence that chilled her to the bone. While organizing her intelligence files, she found a pattern in the information reaching Judge Blackwood. Someone was feeding him details about their operation, details that only someone very close could know. The informant had intimate knowledge of their methods and timing. Worse, the source seemed to know personal information about Zeke that even Sarah had never learned. When she showed him the evidence, his face went pale. "Monsieur Thornfield," he read from her notes. "Where did you get this name?" "It's how the informant signs their messages to Blackwood. Do you know who that could be?" Zeke's hands began to tremble as 3 years of buried grief suddenly threatened to surface. Zeke stared at the name until the letters blurred. Martha Thornfield, his wife. The woman who had drowned 3 years ago when their wagon overturned crossing Willow Creek during spring floods. He had searched the riverbank for days, finding only torn pieces of her blue dress caught on downstream rocks. "Zeke, do you recognize that name?" He couldn't speak. The wound he thought had finally healed split open again, raw and bleeding. "That was my wife's name, but she's dead." Sarah studied his face carefully. The pain there was real and deep, carved by years of grief, but the timing felt too convenient, the implications too dangerous to ignore. "Are you certain she died?" "I watched the river take her." 2 nights later, their worst fears materialized. The family they were transporting included twin boys, barely 8 years old, who had never been separated from their mother. The woman wept silently as Zeke guided them through the forest trail, knowing this might be their last night together before the dangerous crossing into free territory. The trap was perfectly executed. Sheriff Morrison emerged from behind a cluster of pine trees with 3 deputies. Judge Blackwood stepped into the moonlight from the opposite direction, cutting off their retreat. Torches flared to life, surrounding the small group completely. Well, well, the devoted husband and wife, out for a midnight stroll. Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations. None seemed adequate for the presence of 7 people deep in the forest at 2 a.m. "Judge Blackwood, we were just helping my good friends here find their way back to their rightful owners." His smile was cold and satisfied. "I've been tracking your little enterprise for weeks." The family huddled closer together. The mother tried to shield her children from the harsh torchlight while the father stepped protectively in front of them all. "These people have done nothing wrong," Zeke said. "That's not for you to decide. The law is clear about stolen property." Sheriff Morrison produced heavy iron shackles. The metallic clinking sent terror through the captured family. The youngest boy began crying softly into his mother's skirt. "How did you know we'd be here tonight?" Sarah demanded. Judge Blackwood's smile widened. "I have very reliable sources. Someone who knows your husband's habits better than you might expect." The words hit Zeke like physical blows. Only Martha had known about his preference for forest trails over open roads. Only Martha knew he always chose routes near water sources in case of emergencies. The informant wasn't just using his name. They possessed intimate knowledge of his decision-making patterns. "Take them all into custody," Blackwood ordered. "The married couple can explain their actions to a federal judge." But Zeke's military training kicked in during the moment of confusion as deputies moved to secure their prisoners. He created a distraction by stumbling against one of the torches, plunging half the clearing into darkness. In the chaos that followed, he whispered urgent directions to the family. "Follow the creek bed north. Don't stop until you reach the covered bridge." The family melted into the forest shadows while deputies scrambled to relight their torches. By the time visibility returned, only Sarah and Zeke remained in the clearing. "Where did they go?" Sheriff Morrison spun in circles, his torch illuminating empty trees. "Must have run when the light went out," Sarah said innocently. Judge Blackwood's face darkened with fury, but he had no proof of intentional sabotage. Without the escaped family as evidence, his case against the underground network would be much harder to prove. 3 hours later, Sarah and Zeke sat in the courthouse basement, waiting for formal charges to be filed. The interrogation room smelled of mold and fear. Judge Blackwood paced before them like a caged predator. "I know what you've been doing. Moving people north, hiding them in your shop, coordinating with other stations along the route." "We're just married folks trying to make an honest living," Sarah replied. "Your marriage is a sham." "A convenient arrangement to cover illegal activities." "That's a serious accusation," Zeke said. "You have any proof of that?" Blackwood leaned across the wooden table separating them. His breath smelled of whiskey and tobacco. "I have someone very close to you, Mr. Thornfield. Someone who knows things about your past that even your supposed wife doesn't know." The psychological torture was deliberate and effective. Zeke's composure began cracking as possibilities raced through his mind. If Martha was somehow alive, what had she endured these past 3 years? What had driven her to work with someone like Blackwood? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Tell me about the cabin you built near Eagle's Peak. The one with the secret room behind the fireplace where you kept your army maps. Sarah watched Zeke's face go white. She had never heard about any cabin or secret room. This was information only someone extremely close to him would possess. Or perhaps we should discuss your habit of carving your initials in trees along trails you've used, E.T. marking your path like breadcrumbs. Only Martha had teased him about that particular habit. Only Martha called it his way of leaving love notes for her to find when she followed him on hunting trips. Judge Blackwood sensed his psychological advantage and pressed harder. My source has been watching you for months, Mr. Thornfield, recording your patterns, noting your preferences, documenting everything needed to predict your movements. That's impossible. Is it? Tomorrow morning? I'm bringing my informant to testify. Then you'll understand just how thoroughly you've been betrayed. Dawn light filtered through the basement window as Sheriff Morrison unlocked their cell door. No charges had been filed yet, but Judge Blackwood's message was clear. The next encounter would be their last. Walking back to the seamstress shop in silence, Sarah finally voiced the question haunting them both. If your wife is alive, why would she help him destroy us? The courthouse doors opened at exactly 9 o'clock. Judge Blackwood emerged with theatrical precision, flanked by Sheriff Morrison and 2 federal marshals. Behind them walked a woman Zeke had mourned for 3 years. Martha Thornfield looked older, thinner, but unmistakably alive. Her auburn hair, now streaked with premature gray, was pulled back severely. Her green eyes, once warm with laughter, seemed distant and cold. She wore a simple brown dress that hung loosely on her diminished frame. Zeke's knees nearly buckled. The woman he had loved, grieved, and never forgotten stood 20 feet away, regarding him like a stranger. "Hello, Ezekiel." Her voice carried no warmth, no recognition of their shared past. She might have been greeting a casual acquaintance rather than the husband who had searched desperately for her body along miles of riverbank. "Martha. My God, Martha, we thought you were dead." "I was dead to you, apparently. Moved on quickly enough, didn't you?" Her gaze shifted to Sarah with obvious contempt. "Found yourself a replacement wife before my body was even cold." Judge Blackwood stepped forward with satisfaction. "Mrs. Thornfield has been helping me understand your criminal activities. She's provided invaluable insight into your methods and motivations." Sarah studied the woman carefully. Something felt wrong about Martha's demeanor, beyond the obvious trauma of surviving a near drowning. Her responses seemed rehearsed, as if she was reciting lines rather than speaking from memory. "Martha, what happened to you? How did you survive the river?" "I survived because I had to. Washed up on the eastern bank, half drowned and completely alone. No husband searching for me. No rescue party. Just the kindness of strangers who pulled me from the water." Zeke's face contorted with anguish. "I searched for days. I found pieces of your dress caught on rocks downstream. I thought the current had taken you. The current did take me. Carried me 3 miles before I managed to grab an overhanging branch. By the time I crawled to shore, you had already given up looking." Judge Blackwood gestured toward the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Thornfield lost her memory for several months after the accident. When it began returning, she remembered being abandoned by her husband. Naturally, she sought legal assistance to understand her situation. The story was plausible enough to explain Martha's survival and her current allegiance to Blackwood. But Sarah noticed inconsistencies in the woman's account. Small details that didn't align with someone who had genuinely lost and regained their memory. "Tell them about the cabin, Martha," Blackwood prompted. "The cabin near Eagle's Peak, where Ezekiel kept his army maps and planned his scouting routes. He always said it would be our refuge if the war came home." Zeke's shoulders sagged. Only Martha knew about that hidden retreat. Only Martha had helped him stock it with supplies and ammunition during his military service. And his habit of marking trees. E.T. carved into bark along every trail he used. Said it was his way of leaving messages for me. Martha's voice remained flat and emotionless. I followed those marks for years, thinking they meant love. Turned out they just marked paths to other women. The accusation hit Zeke like a physical blow. He staggered backward, reaching out blindly for support. Sarah stepped forward and grasped his arm, steadying him against the emotional assault. That's not true, Martha. There were never other women. I mourned you every day for 3 years. Mourned me so deeply you married someone else the moment it became convenient. Judge Blackwood was clearly enjoying the psychological torture. His informant was destroying Zeke more effectively than any physical punishment could accomplish. But Sarah was listening with different ears. Martha's account contained details that felt manufactured rather than remembered. The emotional responses seemed forced, lacking the genuine pain that should accompany such traumatic revelations. Martha, what was the name of the dog Zeke had when you first met him? The question came without warning. Martha hesitated for just a moment too long. I don't see how that's relevant. Just curious about your life together. What was his favorite meal that you used to cook? Another pause. Martha's eyes flickered toward Judge Blackwood as if seeking guidance. My memory still has gaps from the accident. Sarah pressed harder. What about the scar on his left shoulder? How did he get that? From the war, obviously. But Zeke was shaking his head slowly. The scar on his left shoulder had come from a childhood accident involving a broken fence post. Martha would have known that story intimately. They had been married for 8 years before her supposed death. Recognition dawned in Zeke's eyes as he studied his wife more carefully. The woman standing before him looked like Martha, sounded like Martha, but lacked the essential knowledge that only the real Martha could possess. You're not my wife. Don't be ridiculous, Judge Blackwood snapped. She knows details about your life that no stranger could know. She knows some details, but not the right ones. Zeke stepped closer to examine Martha's face. The real Martha had a small scar above her left eyebrow from falling off a horse when she was 12. This woman has no scar. Martha instinctively touched her forehead, then caught herself making the revealing gesture. Scars fade over time. Not that kind of scar. Not after 25 years. Judge Blackwood's confidence began wavering as his perfectly constructed deception started unraveling. But Martha wasn't finished with her performance. You're trying to escape responsibility for abandoning me, Ezekiel. I am your wife, and I remember everything about our marriage. The desperation in her voice now sounded genuine. But it was the desperation of someone whose lies were being exposed, not someone fighting to reclaim a lost love. Sarah moved closer to the woman. Something about her features seemed familiar, though she was certain they had never met before this moment. If you're really Martha Thornfield, prove it. Tell us something only she would know. The challenge hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. The woman claiming to be Martha Thornfield opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Her confident facade was crumbling under the weight of specific questions she couldn't answer. I told you, my memory has gaps. Convenient gaps that happen to include everything only the real Martha would know, Sarah observed. Judge Blackwood stepped protectively in front of his informant. This interrogation is pointless. Mrs. Zaru Thornfield has provided sufficient evidence of her identity and her husband's criminal activities. But the real Martha Thornfield chose that moment to reveal herself. Stop lying to these people, Rebecca. Every head turned toward the courthouse steps where a second woman had appeared. This one bore an unmistakable resemblance to the first, but carried herself with natural confidence rather than nervous calculation. Her auburn hair fell in familiar waves, and a small scar marked her left eyebrow exactly where Zeke remembered it. Martha? Zeke's voice barely rose above a whisper. Hello, my love. I'm so sorry for what they put you through. The real Martha Thornfield walked down the courthouse steps with the grace Zeke remembered from 1,000 mornings, watching her move through their cabin. Her green eyes held the warmth that had been absent from her imposter's cold stare. Judge Blackwood's face went white as his carefully constructed deception collapsed entirely. Rebecca is my younger sister. She's been pretending to be me for months while that monster held me prisoner. Rebecca finally dropped her false identity with obvious relief. I'm sorry, Ezekiel. He threatened to kill her if I didn't cooperate. Where have you been all this time? Sarah asked Martha. Locked in Blackwood's cellar. He found me half dead on the riverbank 3 years ago and realized I might be useful someday. When you two started your underground network, he decided to use me as bait. Martha's story poured out in a rush of long-suppressed truth. Blackwood had indeed rescued her from drowning, but instead of returning her to her husband, he had kept her imprisoned. He fabricated the story about memory loss and coached Rebecca to impersonate her when the time came to destroy Zeke's operation. He's been selling people back into bondage, Martha continued, using his position as judge to legitimize the capture and return of anyone seeking freedom. Judge Blackwood tried to maintain control of the rapidly deteriorating situation. This woman is clearly unstable. The trauma of her accident has affected her ability to distinguish reality from delusion. The only delusion here is your belief that you could get away with this, Martha replied. She produced a leather satchel from beneath her shawl. Inside were detailed records of Blackwood's illegal activities, names, dates, payments received for captured families. Evidence of a systematic operation that had been destroying lives for profit. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, waiting for the chance to expose him. Sheriff Morrison examined the documents with growing horror. His loyalty to Judge Blackwood evaporated as the scope of the corruption became clear. These records show payments from plantation owners in Georgia and Alabama. You've been selling people back into slavery. Those are forgeries created by a disturbed woman seeking revenge. But federal marshals were already moving to surround Blackwood as the evidence mounted against him. The judge who had presented himself as a pillar of legal authority was revealed as the architect of systematic human trafficking. Martha turned to Sarah with genuine gratitude. Thank you for taking care of him. For giving him purpose when he thought he had lost everything. He saved me as much as I saved him. The 3 of them stood together as Judge Blackwood was led away in shackles. The man who had terrorized their community would face federal charges for his crimes against humanity. Rebecca approached them hesitantly. I know I can't undo the pain I caused, but I want to help make things right. You were protecting your sister, Zeke said. That took courage. Over the following weeks, the truth about Judge Blackwood's operations spread throughout the region. Federal investigators discovered a network of corrupt officials who had been profiting from human misery. Dozens of families were reunited with relatives they thought had been lost forever. Sarah's underground network was officially recognized as a legitimate assistance organization. The government provided funding and legal protection for their work, helping people transition to freedom with dignity and support. The transformation in community attitudes was remarkable. Zeke was no longer seen as too old for meaningful work, but as a wise protector whose experience had proven invaluable. Sarah's intelligence and organizational skills earned respect that transcended the color of her skin. Martha's return created a complex emotional situation that could have destroyed their partnership. Instead, it strengthened their mission in unexpected ways. I don't want to break up what you two have built, Martha told them during a private conversation. What you're doing is too important. The solution emerged naturally. Martha joined their operation, bringing her own skills and 3 years of documented intelligence about regional corruption networks. The Underground Railroad became a family enterprise operated by 3 people who had found their true purpose in service to others. 6 months later, delegations from neighboring towns arrived seeking help, establishing their own assistance programs. The Millhaven model had proven that strategic partnerships could overcome systemic oppression through dignity and intelligence rather than violence. Zeke stood in the same town square where he had once been rejected as too old and worthless. Now he was training other communities in wilderness navigation and family protection techniques. His age had become an asset rather than a liability. Sarah coordinated a regional network spanning 3 states. Her seamstress shop had become headquarters for the most effective freedom assistance program in the territory. Martha managed intelligence gathering and documentation, ensuring that corrupt officials could no longer operate in shadows. Together, they had transformed rejection into redemption, creating hope where once only despair existed.